Do you think that America first means starting another war in the Middle East?
I would just say that the administration does have a legal and moral justification.
Because, boy, the justification sure seems to be changing every 20 minutes.
And interventionism is a more, I would say, kind of responsibility to protect.
And we didn't do this in order to try to protect Israel?
I think that, that's one of the goals.
And how about the endless war part? Regime change part? Remind me about that. Now, the policy of the Trump administration: say one thing in a campaign, write it down on paper, and then go do whatever the hell you want. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So over the weekend, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu launched illegal strikes against Iran. This war for regime change is both unconstitutional and dangerous. Now, we've already lost 6 service members in this war, and President Trump has said, quote, "We may have casualties. That often happens in war." Yesterday, in his briefing to the American people on why our sons and daughters are being sent to war, Trump highlighted the quality of the White House drapes that he had purchased and the gold ballroom that he is building, giving us a sense of what's top of mind for him. Undersecretary Colby, both you and I have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Under the Constitution, who declares war, the president or Congress?
Congress declares war, if I understand correctly.
Thank you. All 3 of my brothers served in the military, and this is personal for me. I am praying for the families who have already lost loved ones and for all of our troops that the president has put in harm's way without legal justification or moral justification. Donald Trump ran on lowering prices on day one and on a, quote, pro-peace ticket. He called himself the peace president, and of course he claims to put America first. So, Undersecretary Colby, do you think that America first means starting another war in the Middle East?
Well, Senator, I would just say that the administration does have a legal and moral justification, and I would certainly support the idea that President Trump is a president of peace. First of all, he has
all I can say is, boy, the justification sure seems to be changing every 20 minutes. But could you answer the question I just asked you? And that is, do you think America first means starting another war in the Middle East?
I would say America first and peace through strength are served by rolling back, as the military campaign is designed to do, the threats posed by Iran's very large and growing missile and one-way attack drone program, its Navy, and of course ensuring that it doesn't have a nuclear weapon. And in fact, I think the evidence is, the proof of that is demonstrated by the global support for this initiative.
So you think America first means starting a war anywhere, anytime? I'm confused because you're here to discuss the Trump administration's national defense strategy, and I'll quote it back to you. No longer will the department be distracted by interventionism, endless wars, regime change, and nation building. Close quote. Interventionism, that means going to another country and bombing them. Endless wars that may last, we don't know how long because there's no clear end point. Regime change, which the president has said this is all about, and nation building. Evidently, the president seems to think he's going to come in and build a different Iran. Now, is that
Senator,
putting America first and following your own
I think I would characterize
objectives?
It fundamentally differently. The defense strategy does talk about the threat posed by Iran and the need to have credible military options. And I don't think this is, certainly as we understand from him and in the goals of the military campaign, this is certainly not nation building. This is not going to be endless, as the president.
So this is not, in your mind, interventionism?
I don't think this is, no, I don't think that's what that nation building, endless wars, that's definitely not.
That's actually the very first word in the Department of Defense.
Interventionism is a more, I would say, kind of responsibility to protect or something. It's obviously not,
really? And we didn't do this in order to try to protect Israel?
I think that, that's one of the goals. It's obviously we're serving our own interests.
Interventionism. And how about the endless war part?
Well, I don't think this is going to be endless.
Is there a clear goal that we will know when this is over?
Well, the president's going to decide exactly how we do it. The military campaigns have clearly defined
and the
scope
regime
goals.
change part, remind me about that. The president, of course, has called it regime change. Do you disagree with him?
No, I think the president has said that this is an opportunity for the people of Iran to rise up and overthrow their oppressors. But as he indicated, the Venezuela model could be one the other day.
Does that sound like regime change?
I think the goals of the military, obviously, allowing the Iranian people to take this matter into their own hands is one of the options here, but the American military campaign is got more
so that's great.
goals,
so the Trump administration first says it's going to be America first, then puts out a national defense strategy, and then goes to war alongside Israel illegally, unconstitutionally. And that is now the policy of the Trump administration. Say one thing in a campaign, write it down on paper, and then go do whatever the hell you want.
The time of the senator has expired. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here, Undersecretary Colby, and for your service. I want to thank you for your leadership and your fortitude to take on, in my view, this foreign policy blob and these entrenched experts that seemingly never go away in this town, who've been continually wrong about so many things over the years. And I think the 2026 National Defense Strategy acknowledges a bunch of things, but certainly that after the Cold War ended, there was never really an adjustment, whether it was trade policy or foreign policy. You know, the idea was that we would help Europe get back on their feet, Japan get back up on their feet with these unfair trade deals, a defense umbrella that, quite frankly, Europe didn't really ever pay for. And that's changing. And I think that's a good thing. And I think it reflects an urgent need on the ground for a foreign policy for disciplined realism, rather than bouncing around from Wilsonian pet project to Wilsonian pet project, that there isn't really a strategy. And I think that the NDS does outline a strategy, because the American people are certainly concerned about the things that are happening in their communities, the influx of drugs. And so when people tried to point out some inconsistency with taking out, these cartel boat runners, I actually had a fake news reporter characterize them as fishing boats. But I think it also, requires us to take a look at our foreign aid too, and making sure it's aligned with these America First principles. I want to ask you, as it relates with limited time, I think your presence at the NATO ministerial meeting and the Munich Security Conference thereafter hopefully was a signal to our European allies that you're willing to engage with them and have thoughtful but constructive dialogue. How are you communicating to our allies this new reality that in order for America to continue to be strong, that they have to step up in a much more meaningful way? I mean, we've heard a lot about the 5%, but the 5% can't be for pensions, right? It has to be for munitions and the defense of their own continent. How are you communicating that, and what's your feedback?
Well, thank you very much, Senator. Really appreciate it, and I think you put it well. And I'd actually like to go back to something, if I could, connected to Senator Reed's comments about the tone. I would say the tone of this document is not partisan, but rather a refutation of a post-Cold War. I mean, I think I'd really like to stress that point, that I think during the Cold War, the substance of this strategy is much more akin to what you would have seen in something like a flexible response document, or Schlesinger, or Harold Brown, or Cap Weinberger, and of course the Secretary gestured.
Wouldn't we be better off as a country if in 1993 we would have had something like this?
I think so. Yeah. I think we got a bit hubristic, well, very hubristic in some cases, and frankly, that this is not saying it's only Democrats. We're pointing at ourselves as well. And I think part of the communication here, and this relates back to Senator Reed's question as well, is to be clear. And there is as people point out, Bob Gates went to NATO in 2011, and Panetta said it, and whoever, and President Barack Obama said it, et cetera, and we were politely ignored because it wasn't seen as credible. And so this strategy is designed to have an impact on real behavior. And in order to do that, you have to break through to people. And sometimes that's being pretty sharp and direct, not with the point of being sharp and direct to be insulting, but to actually get through to people, actually because the best friend is one who tells you when you need to change something. And that gets to your question, Senator, about talking to allies. I talk to the allies all the time. And I talk to Europeans. Any European comes through, I talk to them often privately. But I think the point of what we're trying to do with the visit in Brussels and, with the Secretary's full support and State Department and others, White House, was to say, all right, I think the message has been conveyed. We're obviously going to continue it, but now people are no longer fighting the scenario. People are willing to step up. I had great meetings with the German Minister of Defense, for instance, who is a social democrat, but he's been probably the number one figure, along with the Chancellor, in raising Germany's defense spending. You have Polish government of both types, obviously. The Scandinavian governments. So our view is we want to work towards a results-oriented goal, which I think, Senator, you put it really, really so well, which is common sense. Which, there's, and I've had these conversations of how does it make sense for Americans to be spending 3.5, 4, 5%, 6% of GDP, and wealthy Europeans to be spending 1%? That just makes no sense. The Minister of Defense of New Zealand, who's a real leader on this, she said it a lot over the summer. Since the Cold War, we all dismantled our militaries, we put it into healthcare. The free ride is over. It's not that the alliances are over. The way you're going to save those alliances by making them relevant and equitable for Americans is by rebalancing. Not only is that what we're doing, that's what's happening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.